Have you noticed that your autistic child's meltdowns happen exactly at the moments when you feel the most dysregulated? It isn't a coincidence. It's a mirror. Here's a brutal truth no one told you when the diagnosis arrived. Your child didn't come into this world to be fixed. He came to reveal the parts of you that remain unhealed. And before you close this video in frustration, take a deep breath, because what I'm about to share over the next 40 minutes can free both of you from a silent war that has been destroying your home, your peace, and his childhood. Ancient Stoics understood something modern psychology took 2,000 years to rediscover. Every intense emotional reaction says far more about the one reacting than the one triggering it. Heracles, a 2nd century Stoic philosopher, taught that we live inside concentric circles of concern, and the chaos closest to us always reflects the unresolved chaos within. When your child screams at 3 in the morning, it isn't only his crisis, it's yours. It's your unprocessed childhood, your absent father, your controlling mother. Everything you swore you would never repeat, yet now transmit with surgical precision through impatience, despair, and the disappointment you try to hide. Carl Jung called this psychological projection. The Stoics called it false judgment. Buddhism calls it attachment to the ego. But you, exhausted father or mother at 2 p.m. on an ordinary Wednesday, call it, "My child doesn't listen to me." And there lies the problem, and also the doorway out. This video is not about behavioral techniques. It is not another crisis management strategy. This is a philosophical and psychological invitation to look into the mirror your child holds in front of you every single day, and finally ask yourself, what am I seeing? Whose anger is this? Where does this despair come from? Why do I need him to be different so badly? In the next 7 sections, we're going to walk into territories most autism videos avoid entirely. Your father wound, your maternal complex, your unfulfilled expectations projected onto a brain built through different neurology. We will use the wisdom of Epictetus, Seneca, Musonius, Rufus, and Marcus Aurelius, men who faced unimaginable losses and still found serenity. We will bring Jung into the conversation with synchronicity, complexes, and individuation, and we will apply all of it to the visceral reality of raising a neurodivergent child in a world that demands conformity. In the end, you won't walk away with a magic formula, but you will walk away with something infinitely more powerful, clarity about the person you're truly trying to heal. And when that clarity comes, everything changes, not because your child changed, but because the mirror finally became clean. If this video is already touching something deep inside you, leave a comment saying mirror, subscribe, hit the bell, because this stoic journey of self-knowledge through autism is just beginning. And share this with a parent you know needs to hear this today. Let's begin. The mirror principle. Why Heracles understood that all anger is self-directed. Heracles of Alexandria was not the father of an autistic child, but in the 2nd century he drew something every exhausted parent today should have taped to their refrigerator: the concentric circles of concern. Imagine yourself at the center. Around you, expanding outward, are your immediate family, your extended relatives, your community, your city, your country, and finally, all of humanity. Stoic philosophy urges us to pull the outer circles inward, to expand compassion. But Heracles didn't need to explain the obvious foundation. You cannot expand compassion outward if you do not have peace in your innermost circle. And what happens when your innermost circle, your autistic child, becomes a daily battlefield? The Stoics would say the problem is not the circle, it's the center. It's you. Heracles developed the idea of oikeiosis, the natural sense of belonging and connection that ties us to those closest to us. But what happens when this bond feels violated, when the child, who should feel like a natural extension of you, begins to seem alien, when his behaviors don't evoke instinctive love, but instead trigger visceral resistance? The Stoics were clear. This is not about the child. It is about what you are projecting onto him. It is about the idealized image of a child you constructed and how his different neurology tears that image down day after day. Epictetus, who knew imposed suffering firsthand, said, "People are disturbed not by events, but by the judgments they make about them." Translate that to your child's room at 7 p.m., where he is having the 5th meltdown of the day because you cut the apple the wrong way. The problem isn't the apple, and it isn't even the meltdown. It is the silent judgment rising inside you. He should handle this. He's testing me. He's disrespecting me. He'll never be neurotypical. Every one of those judgments is projection. You are not describing your child. You are describing your fear. The fear left behind by your own childhood. The fear shaped by years of being told you had to behave, achieve, and endure without showing emotion. Jung would call this the shadow, the part of you you were forbidden to express, now thrown back at you through your child's intensity. If you were raised to swallow emotion, then your autistic child's tears are not just noise, they're the echo of your own silenced voice. If you were taught to perform socially at all costs, then your child's refusal to greet visitors isn't just autism, it's the rebellion you never allowed yourself to have. That's why it hurts. That's why your reactions surge out of proportion, because it was never about him. The Stoics urged prosos, constant, vigilant attention. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Watch your mind, let it not escape." He meant a radical level of self-awareness, the ability to catch a thought the moment it forms. So when you think, "My child is impossible," stop. Freeze the moment. Ask yourself, impossible according to whose standards? And where did these standards come from? Most of the time they came from your parents, from the bullying you endured, from the shame you still carry, from the terror of being judged for raising a child with different neurology in a world obsessed with conformity. Here is the brutal Stoic question you must face. Do you love your child, or the idea of who you wanted him to be? Because if it's the second, you are at war with reality. And war with reality is the root of all human suffering. Your child is not the source of your torment. Your resistance to who he authentically is, that is the source. The mirror is in front of you. The question is whether you have the courage to look. 3:47 a.m., he destroys the room for the 5th time. This week, the ultimate mirror test. The digital clock reads 3:47 a.m. You wake up to the sound of something breaking. It's not the first time this week. It's not even the 5th. This is the new routine. You drag your body out of bed, that kind of exhaustion no amount of coffee ever fixes, and walk down the dark hallway already knowing exactly what you'll find. Your autistic child in full sensory overload, the room torn apart, toys scattered everywhere, maybe even blood on his fingers from scratching the wall. And then something happens inside you, something chemical, something ancient, something Seneca described with surgical precision 2,000 years ago. Anger is a temporary madness, for it has no control over itself. Your prefrontal cortex, the rational, philosophical, loving part of your brain, shuts down. The amygdala takes over. You are no longer a parent, you are a reptile. You scream, or worse, you freeze in a cold, punishing silence that he feels more sharply than any yell. And a terrifyingly clear thought crosses your mind. I can't do this anymore. I didn't ask for this. I don't deserve this. And there it is, the mirror. Modern neuroscience finally explains what the Stoics intuited. When your child goes into sensory crisis, your nervous system enters an emotional crisis in parallel. Not because you're weak, but because his overwhelmed system activates your own unregulated system. Dysregulation is contagious. And if you never learned emotional regulation, if your parents never modeled it, if you grew up swallowing rage and fear, then that room at 3:47 a.m. is not just his meltdown. It is your own 30-year delayed breakdown erupting at last. Seneca wrote 3 whole books on anger, not because he was calm, but because he was explosive and knew it. He observed a truth parents rarely admit. Your child doesn't cause your anger. Your child reveals it, reveals the rage fossilized inside you since the first time your father hit you for crying, since the first time your mother shamed you for not being perfect, since every moment you learned emotion was unacceptable. Now you have a child whose brain is intense emotion, whose different neurology processes the world at full volume, and you can't handle it. Not because he's unbearable, but because he forces you to feel everything you spent a lifetime anesthetizing. And so, the Stoic work begins. Stoic 4-step protocol to prevent projection during the storm. Step 1. Prosoce through breath, 10 seconds. Before entering the room, stop at the door. Take 3 deep breaths. Not as some cute self-care ritual, but as applied neuroscience. Deep breathing activates the vagus nerve, calms the amygdala, and brings your prefrontal cortex back online. Marcus Aurelius did this before facing the Roman Senate. You can do it before stepping into a wrecked bedroom. Step 2. Real-time dichotomy of control. Ask, what is under my control right now? His meltdown? No. The broken room? No. Your breath? Yes. Your tone? Yes. Your non-violent presence? Yes. Epictetus was radical. Do not wish events to happen as you want. Wish them to happen as they do, and you will find peace. Translation: your child will break things. Accept this before entering. Step 3. Detect projection. When anger surges, ask, why is this intensity familiar? Because proportionate frustration is human. Disproportionate rage is historical. It belongs to the 5-year-old you who was punished for breaking grandma's vase, to the 8-year-old who was locked in the bathroom for misbehaving. Your child isn't repeating his story. He's repeating yours. Step 4. Silent presence as power. Enter the room. Don't lecture. Don't correct. Don't explain. Just sit near him, breathe. Let your regulated nervous system guide his. This is oikeiosis in action, connection through being, not fixing. Buddhism would call it active compassion. Stoicism calls it virtue in motion. Jung would call it becoming the emotional container your parents never were. And here is the devastating paradox. You can only regulate him when you stop trying to save him and begin healing yourself. Because at 3:47 a.m., in that ruined room, you are not facing only your autistic child. You are facing the abandoned child inside you, Musonius Rufus and the son he never understood. The forgotten story of imperfect Stoic fatherhood. You've probably never heard of Gaius Musonius Rufus, but you should have, because while Marcus Aurelius wrote poetic meditations on serenity and Seneca philosophized endlessly about emotional control, Musonius faced something far more chaotic, real fatherhood, and not just fatherhood. Fatherhood marked by profound disappointment. Rome, 1st century CE. Musonius Rufus was considered the Roman Socrates, a rigorous Stoic, exiled twice for challenging emperors, a man of unwavering principles. He mentored Epictetus, who began life enslaved and became one of the most influential philosophers in history. If anyone understood discipline, virtue, and self-control, it was Musonius. But historical fragments, scattered mentions in contemporary works, scraps of letters, reveal a truth the Stoic tradition quietly avoided. Musonius had a son he could not shape, a son who resisted philosophy, who preferred earthly pleasures to intellectual pursuit, who to Musonius seemed to waste extraordinary potential. We don't have his full name, we don't have detailed accounts, but we have enough to see the outline of a universal story. Even the great Musonius Rufus, champion of Stoic virtue and moral rigor, battled the heartbreak of not recognizing himself in his own child. Before you say, but autism didn't exist back then, think again. Of course it existed. It just didn't have a name. There were children who avoided eye contact, who didn't speak, who had unexplained crises, who were labeled possessed, cursed, or simply abandoned. Musonius likely didn't abandon his son, but he certainly struggled, and that changes everything. Because if even a giant of virtue wrestled with paternal projection, what does that say about you? Musonius wrote revolutionary teachings on education. He insisted women should study philosophy, a radical idea in Rome. He insisted parents must model virtue, not impose it. He insisted children learn through example, not violence. Beautiful theories. But when his own son rejected his path, when he didn't embody Stoic discipline, something inside Musonius fractured. There is a surviving letter fragment where he writes, painfully, "It is easier to teach a willing servant than a resistant son." That is not philosophy. That is confession. That is a wounded father naming the truth. Love does not guarantee alignment. Now translate this to your life. You are not a Roman philosopher. You are a parent of a child with different neurology in 2025, exhausted, overwhelmed, and without any manual. And if Musonius, with all his discipline, wisdom, and access to Rome's greatest minds, could not shape his own child, why do you believe you should be able to shape yours? Stoicism's answer is not to give up, but to redefine what you think guidance means. Heracles spoke of oikeiosis as natural belonging. Musonius expanded it. Belonging is not control. Belonging is not molding a child into your idealized image. True belonging is recognizing who the other person really is and choosing to love them anyway. This becomes brutally difficult when who they are includes nonverbal autism, sensory challenges, unpredictable meltdowns, and an uncertain future. But here is what liberates you. Musonius's son wasn't autistic. He was simply different. And that alone broke his father's expectations. Now imagine the pressure when your child's very neurology diverges radically from your own. The challenge is not rebellion, it is structure, biology, wiring, the architecture of how he experiences existence. Musonius taught that virtue is forged under adversity. Anyone can be a philosopher when life is calm. The real test is pressure. He thought he was preparing his students. In reality, he was preparing himself, because his greatest adversity didn't come from emperors, but from his own home. And here lies the hidden Stoic lesson the surviving texts whisper. Recognizing projection doesn't eliminate the pain. It transforms your relationship with it. Musonius never wrote, "I overcame my disappointment." He wrote about active acceptance, not passive resignation. Acceptance that says, I see he is not who I imagined. I feel the ache of that truth, and yet I remain present. I teach what I can, and I release him to become who he must be. That is Stoic love, not Disney love, not everything will turn out fine, but steadfast presence despite uncertainty. Jung would say, Musonius wrestled with the archetype of the Senex, the wise elder who wants to pass down structure, colliding with the pure Eternus, the eternal child, rejecting structure. Real psychological work is not forcing the pure to become the Senex, but integrating the two, accepting that your child may never embody the wisdom you value, and that this is still a complete life. Musonius's Imperfect Fatherhood shows us you don't need to be an ideal Stoic. You need to be an honest human, because every time you project expectations onto your autistic child, you aren't failing Stoicism. You are simply being human. Musonius did it. Marcus Aurelius did it. He raised Commodus, arguably one of Rome's most corrupt emperors. Even the wisest fathers struggled. Their greatness wasn't in avoiding projection. It was in admitting the struggle and transforming the wound into wisdom. And you can do the same. The 4 Stoic mirrors, mapping your projections before they damage your child. Now we move into the real work. Enough theory, enough Roman history. You need a practical map to identify your projections before they become wounds your child will carry for life. Because here is the truth no parent wants to face. Every projection you fail to recognize becomes trauma for your child, and every unhealed trauma inside you becomes a projection onto him. It is a cycle, and you can break it starting today. The Stoics were obsessed with self-examination. Marcus Aurelius ended each night reviewing his day. Where did I lose my composure? Where did I judge unfairly? Where did I fail to act with virtue? Not out of guilt, but out of prosoche, vigilant awareness as a tool for freedom. You will use that same awareness, but specifically applied to your autistic child. Here are the 4 mirrors every parent must confront. Mirror 1. What you reject in him is what you long ago rejected in yourself. List the behaviors that disproportionately irritate you. not normal frustrations, but the ones that make you furious, ashamed, or overwhelmed. He's slow. You spent your whole life being called slow and built hyperproductivity to survive. He's sensitive. You were shamed for crying, so now you freeze every emotion until you turn to stone. He struggles socially. You grew up lonely and still carry the sting of exclusion. He needs extreme routine. You grew up in chaos and swore you'd never be weak like people who rely on predictability. Epictetus said, "It is not the person who insults you that troubles you, but your judgment." Translation, your child is not the problem. Your unprocessed story about that trait is the real bomb. Practice. When disproportionate anger rises, ask, when was I punished or rejected for being like this? The answer always exists. And once you name it, you'll realize you are not correcting your child. You are punishing your younger self. Mirror 2. What you demand from him is what you never achieved yourself. This one is brutal. Parents project dreams they never fulfilled. Always. But when the child has different neurology, this projection becomes torture. You wanted to be socially accepted. Now you push him to socialize even when his brain processes connection differently. You wanted to be athletic. Now you force sports onto a child with motor challenges. You wanted independence. Now you panic because he may never follow the life script you imagined. You wanted validation. Now you suffocate him with academic pressure to prove you're a good parent. Seneca warned, people rarely ask whether their desires are just, only whether they are possible. You have never asked if it is just to demand that your autistic child fulfill the version of you you never became. Practice. List 3 things you obsessively demand from him. Then ask, is this for his growth or my wounded ego? Mirror. 3. What you fear in him is what you fear in yourself. Fear fuels projection. Parents of neurodivergent children live in constant fear. Afraid he will fail? You failed once and never healed. Afraid he will be rejected? You still bleed from your own rejections. Afraid he will be alone? You are alone even surrounded by people. Afraid he will become a burden? You grew up believing you were one. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "What we fear is worse in imagination than in reality." Your fear about his future is not prophecy. It is a projection of your past. Practice. Complete the phrase, if my child never improves, it proves that I am... Whatever word appears, failure, unlovable, inadequate, that is your core wound speaking, not truth. Mirror 4. What you admire in him is the freedom you never allowed yourself. Not all projections are shadows. Some are light. Your autistic child is fiercely authentic. You wore masks for 40 years. He doesn't care about status. You chased approval your whole life. He lives fully in the present. You stay trapped in future anxiety or past regret. He feels intensely. You numbed yourself to survive. Jung called this positive projection, when we envy in others the freedom we deny ourselves. And yes, even this can become dangerous. Idealizing neurodivergence, romanticizing struggle, using your child as proof of your own suppressed rebellion. But it can also be an opportunity. Learn from him. Let his authenticity teach you to shed your masks. Let his emotional intensity reconnect you to your own. Practice. Ask, what does my child do naturally that I wish I had the courage to do? Then do it. Don't wait for him to grow. Grow yourself. The daily prosocial ritual. Each night before sleep, review your day through the 4 mirrors. Where did I reject in him what I reject in myself? Where did I demand from him what I never achieved? Where was my fear about him really fear about me? Where did he show me a freedom I deny myself? Write it down. Not for publication, for purification. Every projection named loses half its power. Every wound identified begins to heal. And every moment you pause in anger and ask, where is this really coming from? You are not just saving your child. You are saving the child you once were. Your father complex is raising your child. How to heal the wound you're passing down. Carl Jung uncovered something deeply unsettling while working with families in early 20th century Switzerland. Unresolved trauma is transmitted across generations like invisible software running in the background of the psyche. He called these emotional programs complexes, dense constellations of memory, fear, and unprocessed pain that shape behavior without our awareness. And the most powerful complexes of all, the father complex and the mother complex. It doesn't matter whether your father was absent, violent, cold, or superficially decent. If there is unresolved pain in that relationship, you are passing that wound to your autistic child, unconsciously, unintentionally, but consistently. Here is the generational pattern Jung observed again and again. Your grandfather was rigid and authoritarian. Your father, traumatized by that rigidity, swung to the opposite extreme and became overly permissive. You, raised without structure, became hyper-controlling to avoid the chaos you grew up in. And now your autistic child, who needs structure but cannot tolerate control, forces you to confront 3 generations of emotional dysregulation all at once. This is not coincidence. Jung would call it synchronicity, meaningful alignment between outer events and inner realities. Your child didn't cause your wounds, but he arrived at the exact moment when those wounds could no longer remain buried. His different neurology is the external event. Your unprocessed pain is the internal magnet. Together, they synchronize into the challenge designed to push you toward integration. You did not choose to have an autistic child, but your psyche, at the deepest unconscious level, recognized that only a child like this could force you to confront the parts of yourself you've spent your whole life avoiding, not as punishment, as evolution. The Stoics captured this in another language. The obstacle is the way. What stands in your way becomes your path. Jung said it differently. What you most avoid is where your next step in growth lies. Your autistic child is both obstacle and path. And the more you resist what he reflects, the more intense his behaviors become. Not because he is trying to hurt you, but because your resistance amplifies your projection. He is not only being autistic, he is being the mirror of your father complex. The 3 archetypes colliding in your home. Jung believed that archetypes, universal patterns of human experience, shape how we relate to the world. In your relationship with your autistic child, 3 archetypes are in constant conflict. 1. The Senex, the old wise man, your internal father figure, rigid, structured, moralizing, demanding order. This is the voice inside you that says, "In my day, this would never be tolerated." 2. The pure Eternus, the eternal child. Your autistic child represents this: spontaneous, authentic, maskless, fully present in the now. This drives you mad because you had to kill your own pure to survive adulthood. 3. The wounded healer, the most important archetype. You can only heal in another what you've learned to face in yourself. Every parent of a neurodivergent child carries this archetype, trying to save the child while bleeding from unhealed wounds. You can't emotionally regulate your child if you can't regulate yourself. You can't teach acceptance if you're at war with your own past. You can't offer presence if you're dissociated from your own pain. As Jung said, "I cannot lead a patient further than I have gone myself." Translated for parenting, you cannot guide your child into emotional safety while you remain emotionally unsafe. Synchronicity, your child as an unintentional teacher. Some parents have neurotypical children and never confront their trauma. They never question their patterns. They stay on autopilot forever. But you don't have that privilege. Your autistic child is synchronicity embodied. He forces individuation, the Jungian process of becoming who you truly are instead of who you were conditioned to be. Each of his meltdowns is an invitation into your own psyche. Each of his resistances is a mirror of your resistance to self-knowledge. Each sensory overload is a signal pointing to an emotional overload inside you. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way." Your child is not blocking your peace. He is advancing your evolution. Peace will come after the transformation, never before. And here lies the paradox you've been avoiding. The more you try to fix your child to gain peace, the less peace you have, because fixing comes from fear, and fear transmits like electricity. Peace doesn't come from modifying him. It comes from integrating yourself. How to heal the wound. you're passing down. Step 1. Identify the complex. Ask, how would my father react in this moment? If your instinct is to behave opposite to him, you are still trapped in the complex. Opposition is not freedom, it is another form of captivity. Step 2. Dialogue with the wound. Jung used active imagination, speaking internally to your fragmented parts. Before bed, imagine your father sitting across from you. Ask him, what were you feeling when you wounded me? Not to excuse him, but to humanize him. Because while he remains a monster, you remain a victim, and victims create new monsters. Step 3. Choose consciously instead of reacting automatically. Epictetus said, between stimulus and response there is space. In that space lies our freedom. Your child screams. You have 3 seconds before the complex takes over. Use them. Breathe. Ask, is this my father's voice or mine? Step 4. Forgiveness as liberation, not absolving. You may never forget what your father did, but you can stop letting it dictate the way you treat your child. Forgiveness in Stoicism is not, it's okay. It is, this pain will not govern the future I create. The day you stop trying to fix your child is the day his healing begins. Here's the truth no one told you in the first appointment. You cannot fix your child. You never could. And the obsession with trying is, paradoxically, the very thing preventing any genuine transformation. Does that sound like giving up? Neglect, betrayal, good. If it stings, it means we've reached the wound that matters. The Stoics were masters of paradox. Epictetus taught, freedom is found in wanting things to be exactly as they are. This isn't passivity. It's the radical recognition that control is an illusion, and the only real power you have is the power to stop fighting reality. Translate that into your child's different neurology. You don't control whether he will speak. You don't control whether he will socialize. You don't control whether he will be independent. You don't control how the world will treat him. And every second you spend trying to force what is not yours to control, you damage both your life and his. Because when you turn your child into a project to be fixed, here's what he learns: that love is conditional on improvement, that he is not enough as he is, that his existence is a problem, that he must change to earn peace. This isn't therapy. This is emotional violence disguised as devotion. The Stoic paradox: control comes from letting go of control. Marcus Aurelius governed the largest empire in the world. He could command armies, wealth, and nations. And yet he wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events." If Rome's emperor surrendered the fantasy of total control, who are we to cling to it? This doesn't mean abandoning therapies or interventions. It means abandoning the internal posture of desperation, the mindset that sees your child's neurology as a fire that must be extinguished. Because while you view his autism as catastrophe, you transmit one message: I cannot accept you as you are. And children absorb this, not intellectually but energetically. Autistic children feel emotional frequencies with uncanny precision. They don't interpret your words, they interpret your nervous system. And a parent radiating fear, resistance, and urgency creates an emotional environment indistinguishable from danger. Cleanthes and the Stoic prayer of surrender. Cleanthes, successor to Zeno, wrote the Stoic hymn to Zeus, a prayer of fierce acceptance. Lead me, O Zeus and destiny, wherever you have ordained. I will follow without hesitation, and if I resist, I will follow still, but suffering. This is not fatalism, it is clarity. You can walk your child's path willingly, or you can be dragged by it. The destination does not change, only the amount of suffering does. Your child's neurology does not wait for your acceptance, it simply is. Your only real choice is, will I meet it with resistance or with love? Buddhism, active compassion versus invasive compassion. Buddhism distinguishes between 2 kinds of compassion. Invasive compassion: I will rescue you from your suffering because I cannot bear to witness it. This is not compassion, it is control dressed in spiritual language. Active compassion: I will walk beside you. I will support your needs, but I will not erase who you are, to soothe my anxiety. Your autistic child does not need salvation. He needs presence. He needs accommodations. He needs respect for his authentic ways of being. He needs support, not correction. He does not need you to wage war on his neurology. The sacred paradox. The moment you stop trying to fix your child is the moment something sacred happens. He becomes free to grow, not grow into who you think he should be, but into his own life, his own pace, his own identity, and you begin to grow too, not into the parent you fantasized being, but into the parent you were always capable of becoming. This is the beginning of real healing, not his, yours. The mirror's final message: your child didn't come to heal you, but to invite you into courage. Dewey, we've reached the end. But before we close, I need to tell you something you might resist, but that your deeper self already knows. Your autistic child is not your redemption story. He did not come into the world with a secret mission to heal your childhood wounds. He is not your involuntary therapist. He is not a divine punishment or a divine reward. He came to live his own life, and you have a choice. Witness that life with courage or sabotage it through your projections. At the height of imperial power, Marcus Aurelius wrote something devastatingly simple. Life is opinion, not fact, not destiny, opinion, interpretation, judgment. Your child's different neurology is a fact, but the meaning you attach to it, tragedy, burden, blessing, opportunity, is a philosophical decision. And your decision determines whether you spend the next 20 years in war or in peace. The last 40 minutes were about mirrors, about projection, about how your child reflects the wounds you have avoided. But now, we need to turn the mirror around, because there is something else he reflects that you have been afraid to see: your own dormant courage. You have survived more than you admit. You stand up after nights when most people would collapse. You continue parenting under pressure that the world doesn't understand. This isn't weakness. It is quiet, unspoken resilience. Your child sees it, even when you don't. Amor fati. Loving your fate without romanticizing pain. Nietzsche popularized the phrase, but it is purely Stoic in spirit. Amor fati, love your fate, not passive acceptance, not masochistic surrender, but an act of fierce engagement with what is. You did not choose an autistic child, but he is here, and you can spend a lifetime mourning the imaginary child who never arrived, or you can love, fiercely and fully, the real child breathing beside you. This does not mean pretending it is easy. Marcus Aurelius never pretended that ruling Rome during a plague was simple. He simply refused to add mental suffering to factual suffering. He wrote, "Do not waste the rest of your time complaining. Your child is who he is. How much longer will you waste the time you have resisting that truth?" Applied to autism, amor fati becomes, my child has different neurology. He may never speak. He may never be independent. And I choose to love him exactly as he is. Not because it is inspirational, but because the alternative, living in quiet rejection, is emotional poison. When you finally embrace amor fati, something extraordinary happens. The enormous energy you were wasting resisting reality becomes available for something real: connection, presence, joy, clarity. Memento mori, you have limited time with him. The Stoics meditated daily on death, not out of morbidity, but urgency. Memento mori, remember that you will die, and he will too. If everything goes well, you have 40 or 50 years with him, maybe less. And how much of that time are you burning on frustration, comparison, disappointment, fantasies about who he should be? Seneca said, "It is not that we have little time, but that we waste much." Every night you obsess over what he didn't do, you lose a day that never returns. Every meltdown where you respond with anger instead of presence becomes lost time. Time you cannot reclaim. When your life ends, or his, you will not regret that he wasn't neurotypical. You will regret not having been fully present for who he authentically was. So every morning before waking him, ask yourself, if today were my last day with him, how would I treat him? The answer is always with more patience, more tenderness, more acceptance. So why wait? Individuation. The journey is not yours alone. Jung taught that individuation, becoming who you truly are, doesn't happen in isolation. We individuate in relationship, and your autistic child is the relationship pushing you the most. He pushes you to surrender control. He pushes you to confront ego. He pushes you to release masks. He pushes you to stop loving conditionally. He pushes you to become real. This is his unconscious invitation, not to heal you, but to call you into courage. Courage to feel, courage to confront your history, courage to heal your own nervous system, courage to stop projecting your childhood onto his childhood. Jung said, "There is no coming to consciousness without pain." Your child is not giving you random pain. He is giving you the necessary pain for you to evolve. If you resist, it becomes lifelong suffering. If you accept, it becomes transformation. The final call: be the parent your child already knows you can be. Here is the frightening truth. Your autistic child, nonverbal, sensory sensitive, disconnected according to the world, sees you with more precision than anyone else. He knows when you're present. He knows when your touch is love or obligation. He knows when you accept him or merely tolerate him. Autistic children have emotional radar systems more accurate than most adults' perception. You can deceive therapists, teachers, even your partner. You cannot deceive him. He is waiting, not for perfection, but for authenticity. Epictetus wrote, "Circumstances do not make the man, they reveal him." Your child's autism didn't break you. It revealed where you were already broken. And now that you know, you can choose: remain broken or begin reconstruction. Every day, Marcus Aurelius recited this mantra before dawn. Today, I will meet difficult people, but they act as they do because of their conditions, not from malice. Adapt it for yourself. Today, my child may have meltdowns. He may challenge me, but I will not be shaken because he acts from different neurology, not from defiance. And I choose love. That is stoic courage, not fearlessness, but doing what is right despite fear. Your child did not come to heal you. He came to invite you into the courage to heal yourself. Accept the invitation. The mirror is clean now. You can finally, 40 minutes ago, you probably clicked on this video expecting another behavioral technique, another crisis management method, another promise that everything will get better if you just do A, B, or C. But what you received instead was something radically different, a mirror. And mirrors don't lie. They reflect. And you saw, perhaps for the first time with this level of brutal clarity, that the real war is not happening in your autistic child's bedroom. It has been happening inside you all along. We revisited Heracles and his circles of concern. We stood in that room at 3:47 a.m. for the ultimate test of projection. We walked with Musonius Rufus through the imperfect fatherhood of ancient philosophers. We mapped the 4 stoic mirrors of your wounds. We dove with Jung into the complexes you've been transmitting without knowing. We learned the liberating paradox, that healing begins the moment you stop trying to fix your child. And finally, we arrived at courage. The courage to look directly into the mirror your child has been holding up to you since the beginning. 7 sections, 7 truths, 1 core message. You are not raising your autistic child. You are being reshaped by him. And now comes the real question. What will you do with this awareness? The Stoics never believed in sudden enlightenment. They believed in daily practice, constant discipline, and an unending return to the central principle of prosos, vigilant attention. Every morning you wake up and choose, will I see my child through the lens of my wounds or through the truth of who he authentically is? Every meltdown you breathe and ask, where is this anger really coming from? Every night you review your day and ask, where did I project? Where did I love instead? This isn't a one-week transformation, it's a life's work. Marcus Aurelius wrote his meditations for decades, not because he conquered these truths, but because he kept forgetting them under the weight of real life. You will forget too. You will project again. You will yell again. You will break again, and that's okay. Stoic victory is not never falling. It is rising each time with greater awareness. Your autistic child is not a problem to be solved. He is an involuntary teacher of the truth you avoided for years. You are not perfect, you never were, and you don't need to be. Epictetus said, It is not what happens to you, but how you respond that matters. Your child's different neurology happened. You did not choose it, but how you respond, with love or resistance, with presence or avoidance, with courage or fear, that you choose every day. And if you choose courage, if you choose to clean the mirror, heal your wounds, end the generational transmission of emotional poison, accept fate with amor fati, and live each day as if it were your last with him, then something sacred unfolds. Not the curing of autism, but the healing of the relationship. And in the end, it is the relationship that defines everything, not the diagnosis. If this video touched something in you, if something broke or awakened, write in the comments, "I accept the invitation." 3 words that change everything. Subscribe to continue this stoic journey of conscious parenthood. Turn on notifications, and above all, share this with a parent you know is fighting a silent war inside themselves. Because the greatest revolution is not changing your child, it is changing the mirror through which you see him. Time is moving. Your child is growing. Life will not wait for you to resolve every wound before you begin loving authentically. Start today. Start now. Start by accepting the invitation to courage. The mirror is clean now at last. You can see.